Great. Thank you, Tracy. It's great to be here with AIA New Hampshire again. Welcome, everybody. So just before we get started, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about where Rena and I are coming from with Charette Venture Group. So CVG's mission is to help small architecture firms across the US be better businesses. And we currently have about 21 long-term clients around the US, and they are located in urban areas and rural areas, and really have a diversity around the industry sectors that they're a part of, which gives us a very interesting perspective on kind of what's happening around the country and different small firms. The firms that we work with are typically under 20 people. And what we've noticed and observed is really a lot of these firms have commonalities around their business and operational, financial, marketing challenges. And that's really why CVG exists, is we are consultants that help deal with these business challenges of small architecture firms in various aspects. So leadership, human resources, talent recruitment, financial management, operations, marketing and business development, and frankly, a lot more. But our services are really encompass everything that's on the business side of a small architecture firm that's not architecture itself. So if you have needs in any of these areas, I encourage you to reach out. I will put our contact information in the chat window throughout this presentation so you can see it. But we'd love to talk to you, and we'd love to just learn more about small architecture firms. So feel free to schedule a consultation with us. We're a group of 10 people. We're located actually across the world, and we all bring different expertise in the areas of small architecture firm management and marketing and business development. We also have, which isn't shown here, we just started a bookkeeping division this year. So we have 3 bookkeepers that work exclusively with small architecture firms. If you're interested and need that service, let us know. So that being said, let's talk about what we're going to cover today. So we're going to talk about why business planning, especially with the year that we just had, where it seems like any plans we made in 2019 were very much disrupted. So Rena will talk a lot about that, and we'll cover what's in a business plan, the different components: purpose, finance, marketing, and sales, and operations. And then also throughout, we'll be talking about how it all connects, and we'll kind of wrap that together at the end of the presentation. Go ahead, Rena.
Well, hello everybody. It's great to be here and to talk with you. And as Tracy said in the introduction, I'm an architect like most of you, and I've always approached business planning as a design exercise. And I wanted to start with this slide showing kind of the parallel processes that happen in business planning that to building design. And of course, in business planning, when we get to the end of it, we have to start over again, because it's really about strategic thinking and adapting to changing circumstances. But as we all know, as architects and planners, that's much easier to do if you have a plan to begin with. We encourage planning, and part of the reason to plan is because of the life cycle of our firms. All firms have beginning, middle, and many have ends, as shown in this slide, when the 30-year practice life of most firm founders begins to decline. And if there's no successor, if there's no value built in the firm, most often firm leaders will choose to close it and just go on. But there is another alternative, which is to begin to cultivate second generation leaders and to create a firm that has value to successors and can continue to go on and keep the legacy of firm founders for many, many generations. I mean, we work with one firm in Northwest Washington State that has been going for 60 years, and they're on their 3rd group of successors. So, firms can really learn from the knowledge that's accrued over time. and we have learned in Shred Venture Group that growth of a firm and creating value in a firm is, it's a good business strategy. A lot of firms, a lot of firm leaders we talk to are resistant to the notion of growth because they associate it with being a big company, but growing from 5 to 12 or from 12 to 18, those are big steps, and they make a huge difference in the ability for firms to be sustainable and have a legacy to pass on. And we find that when firms cross that threshold of 500K for net revenue or getting to 1 million, that firms can become highly profitable. And most of the firms in our network have really increased their profitability along with their revenue. And growth doesn't always mean more people. Sometimes it can mean growth in expertise, which allows for higher fees and so forth. So one of the factors that we have to understand as entrepreneurs or firm owners when we're thinking about growing is that it almost always requires sharing power with other people, allowing other people to do things. And this chart is from Harvard Business Review some years ago, but from a research study that shows that most firm founders can do a lot better, financially if they're able to share power and able to bring second generation leadership into a firm. I mean, it's okay to be the king or the queen of your little domain. There's nothing wrong with that. And you can grow to maybe be 5, 6, maybe even 8 like that. And many firms have wonderful practices built on that. But there is another alternative to grow, to have a more sustainable and a firm that's a business that becomes a valuable entity. So as you think about that, and as you think about planning, you have to kind of go inside and have a sense of self-knowledge, because even if you decide that you want to share power and grow the value of your firm and the size of your firm, you may find that it's just not your personality style to do that. And as a leader, maybe you prefer to have more control and to have a more closely held firm where you can really influence everything. Others are at the other end of the spectrum where they really enjoy empowering other people and defining limits and vision, but allowing other people to do a lot of things. So understanding where you are will kind of help you in some of the other aspects of the business planning that we'll talk about, such as your purpose and vision and how you want to build your business model. However, we exist in a very unpredictable environment. And 2020, if there was ever a year to exhibit the unpredictability of our environment, that was it. I mean, I think most of us in March and April were very scared, knowing that usually when the macro economy falls, so does the construction industry. But we've seen something different, and I'll go into that a little bit more later. But the point here is that in order to understand unpredictable environments, you have to look at them over time, and you have to understand patterns. So the hurricane scientists, have understood by observing trends and patterns over time what's likely to happen with a hurricane, which is basically an unpredictable event. If certain circumstances are there in the Gulf of Mexico, something, a hurricane will form, but you never know when that's going to happen, and you don't exactly know its path, but we do know through observing trends, how it might be. And this idea applies to our business planning as well. So we can look at trends in the macro economy, and This is, of course, a graph of the gross domestic product change since 1995. And until this year, I was always talking about the period between 2008 and 2010, the Great Recession, where many of us suffered in having our firms really need to downsize and our clients go away. And you know, we've recovered since then, but then 2020, you know, the GDP, you know, it's just out of scale with everything else that's happened, you know, in the modern era, you know, due to the closures. And however, in the business cycle, we're seeing a kind of a interruption or a change from the usual cycle, mostly around the country. And this is an example of kind of the big picture trends that you want to watch. If you see these kinds of things happening, you can get a sense that we're moving into the business cycle. But in the COVID economy, if we go to the next slide, Emily, we had this thing that happened with this you know, extreme downturn. A lot of firms, you know, had a lot of projects go on hold in March and April, even into May, and then suddenly it bounced back. And in many markets, not everywhere, but in many markets, we're in a boom market again. You know, firms are busier than ever. Most of the firms in our CVG network are hiring. They just, you know, it's so unusual that the construction industry should be doing the opposite of the general economy, which frankly is in a very deep recession with, you know, considerable extreme unemployment and many people suffering economically. Nevertheless, oops, can you keep it there for a second? Back to the other slide. Nevertheless, there are things that are really keeping the construction industry going. Very low interest rates, the government stimulus to some extent. But I just want to say that you have to, if you are in a boom market, you have to watch out for the risk factors that come with any boom market, like overbuilding, like inflation within the construction industry, you know, contractors being too busy, prices going up very high for materials. So, you know, we're in a good space, but we could, the scales could tip at any time. Okay, now. So besides the macro economy, of course, we have to look internally to the micro economy of our firms and track how we're doing in terms of our just big picture key financial indicators, you know, revenue versus expenses versus net revenue. And going back to big picture trends, we want to think about, you know, the demographic trends, the change in the labor force. And, you know, when I had this, I used to, you know, 9 months ago when I would show this slide, I would say things like, you know, younger people want to do remote work and we have to, you know, be more flexible in our firms and we have to have, you know, flex time and all kinds of things like that, which are now standard practice. Everybody's got to do it and has been doing it mostly. There are some exceptions around the country, but suddenly the kinds of things that are the new generation of workforce wants and needs are, you know, what we all want and need all the time. So it's an interesting shift. I also just want to quickly mention demographics and some big picture trends in the industry. Essentially, we're becoming bigger. Firms are becoming bigger as time goes on. The number of firms between 1 and 9 is going down, as is their share of staff and their share of billings quite dramatically. And whereas 50 and more is going up, and it's only 1%, but it's a lot. It's a big share of the staff that they've done, and apparently the share of billings have gone down a little bit, which is a bit interesting. But in the middle, and we're finding that the sweet spot for firms is like 15 to 20, which is considered a mid-sized firm in this graph. and they're holding steady. But you'll notice that their share of staff has gone down, yet their share of billings have gone up, which means that they're being able to make more money per person, which is really a good trend. And I really think that the 15 to 20 size for firms, very agile, but very, able to do bigger projects. And it's really a good size. So all this talk about strategy and planning and trends and understanding where you want to go is kind of meaningless unless you create a culture that supports and is consistent with the kinds of growth and business goals that you have. So we like to talk a lot about culture and about having cultures that support both design excellence and business effectiveness. So in the next slide, we have these words, and we ask many of our firms, what do you like? What are your cultures? These are the kinds of words that we get, which we love. We love this about our industry. We're just, so people oriented and want to be engaged. And we also need this following slide words, which is the kinds of things that help us be successful and profitable and make our firms sustainable and create, a legacy for our knowledge. We need discipline, we need consistency. All of these words are not adversarial to design excellence. They help promote it. So with that, I'll turn it over to Emily to talk about this.
Sure. Great. Thanks, Trina. So we look at why plan, why plan in an unpredictable environment. So let's talk about how to do this, where to start. And most importantly, it's really about the process. And what's so important is getting the conversation started. And whether it's just you as a sole proprietor or as the leader of your firm, or whether it's you and partners that need to get on the same page, the conversation is very, very valuable. And we've seen business plans that are like back of the napkin type of things, like really, really basic, a few pages maybe. And then we've seen, there can be really long, extensive business plans that have tons of research and market research and SWOT analyses, et cetera. And most of us realistically don't have the resources to do the latter, but it's very important to do the former. And one resource for that I'll just put out there that we love is the 60-minute business plan. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Mark LePage, an Entree architect, and he has just a really nice podcast about how to accomplish this in 60 minutes. It's very similar to what we'll talk about today, but if you're looking for additional resources, this is helpful. So what's in a business plan? We've got four main components, and the first of which is the purpose and the business model. This is basically mission and vision and the why your firm exists in the first place. And when we're talking about the business model itself, sometimes, most small architecture firms are really basic, fee-for-service kind of models. Sometimes you'll have an alternate revenue stream that you need to plan for and flesh out a little bit. Sometimes, people are delivering services slightly differently. And if you're doing a business plan and you're doing something, alternative to the norm, definitely need to spell that out. But in general, talking about the mission and the vision is very important, why your firm exists. The financial plan, how will your firm make a profit? The marketing and sales plan, how will you bring in projects? And the operations plan, which is how will your firm execute its mission? So you have all of this as part of the business plan itself, and you certainly don't want this to sit on a shelf. So the action plan is another key component, and this is really a behavior. This is assigning roles and responsibilities to the tasks outlined in the plan, and it's very important to actually see results, to have a good, solid, consistent action plan. So when we talk about mission and vision, a lot of firms don't spend too much time on this or have a very general or generic mission and vision, and that's okay. If you're not, really really highly mission-driven firm, your mission might be a little bit more vague, but it's really important to define this because your mission and your vision touch every aspect of your business plan. I mean, your mission can affect your hiring choices. It can affect financial decisions. It can affect management style and marketing messaging. So it appears everywhere in all of these different business planning components. And if you're not really familiar with where to start, you can just begin to ask yourself these questions. What was your main intention when you founded your firm? Why did you start your business? Why did you go off on your own? What do you do and what's unique about it? How do you do it? What's the process like? Who are your clients like? What's your target market? What value are you bringing to them uniquely? And what are the basic beliefs, values, and philosophies that guide you? Most strong firms that we know of, you can really ask almost any employee to articulate the mission of the firm, and they're able to give some version that's very close to what the principals would say.
All right, I'm back again. So let's just quickly go through some aspects of the financial plan, and we're just gonna talk very quickly about how to develop a pro forma, kind of looking out 5 years, what financial goals and expectations are. Often in business plans that we see done by small firm architects, there isn't a lot of attention to this, and kind of seems mysterious. So let's try to demystify it a little bit. Go to the next slide. We'll start with your sense of a profit and loss statement, and this can be in a lot of forms, but basically you want to think about what's your revenue, what projects do you have going on, what kind of revenue stream can you expect, and what are your expenses? And there are expenses that are direct to a project that are usually called cost of goods sold, or direct expenses that would come off your total income. And then you get what we call net operating revenue, or total income in this example, and then we take out your operating expenses and we get your income at the end. So let's go on to the next slide. But as you're developing your financial goals for years to come, you can use a scenario plan tool such as this, which we call a profit plan, in which you list all the people in your firm now, or maybe next year or 5 years from now, as you imagine them to be, what their salary will be, how many direct labor hours per year they're going to be able to do based on their utilization rate, which is project hours relative to total hours. Then you take your direct labor hours or project hours times the billing rate, and you can get an idea of what the capacity, what the potential billable dollars of this firm would be. Now, most architectural firms, I dare say nearly all, do not get paid for every hour that they work on projects, even when they're billing by the hour. So we always have to adjust those potential billable dollars down a little bit. In this case, 80%. Best practice is more like 85 to 90%, should be paid. But with that, we can get a monthly revenue goal and basically an annual revenue goal for each year as we plan forward. Of course, you have to consider the other side, your cost structure. And this is an example for a firm, that's maybe under 10, that's getting, $500,000 to $1 million a year in net revenue after you take away the pass-throughs. And this is the kind of sort of ideal cost structure we like to see. And you'll see there's 16% profit in there. We believe that architecture firms can do between 10 and 20% profit or net income at the end of the year. Now, of course, that's before taxes and bonuses and distributions to partners. but we want to see that at the partners being paid, market rate salaries. So in a firm of this size, payroll is going to be around 50%, and then, the rest of the expenses look more like this. As you build your financial pro forma, you can use the profit plan to develop the revenue forecast for each of the years, and then your expense forecast to determine the other factors of your overhead expense. And I have direct labor pulled out of that. And again, that's labor that's worked on projects, because essentially that's all we have to sell. So everything that is, all the key financial indicators are in relation to that direct labor. And it's a very important number to understand as we plan forward in our firms. Then we get a profit forecast, and also revenue per person is figured in the bottom line there. And that's a very important planning tool. If you know what your revenue per person has been for the last 5 years or so in your firm, even if it's just you, that's very predictive of what's possible as you move forward in time. Even as you grow, you may find that your revenue per person, actually declines a little bit, although in the best case scenario, it will continue to increase. So you'll have something like this when it comes to actually putting it in a business plan, looking at your gross revenue, your direct expenses, your operating expenses, and then what you can expect in terms of profitability.
Okay.
And we said we would stop here and see if there are
any
questions. So I'm glad I remembered. Are there any questions? Any questions in the chat room? I know we go through this, it's quite quick, and I'll have a chance to review this later, I'm sure. And of course, we are available for any questions after the seminar. But, anything now, Tracy?
We don't have any questions yet.
Okay. Well, we have another chance at the end. So.
Yep.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay. All right, let's talk about the marketing and sales plan, also known as business development plan. Really how your firm is going to bring in projects. How are you going to bring in work? And this plan includes, defining your target markets, understanding what their needs are. In the case of looking forward to next year, identifying what the unique opportunities are going to be for every coming year, but particularly 2021. What's unique about it, and how can you meet your clients' changing needs, and how can you get in front of the right clients? What are your tactics that you're going to use, and what's your budget for these tactics? And in business plans, we often see a client acquisition strategy, which might be an unfamiliar term to many of you. But it's really that intersection between marketing and business development that talks directly about how you are going to find the perfect client who needs your services, and how you are going to sell to them and make them your client. So we'll look at a version of that. But before we go into the steps, I'd like to make sure that we all understand the difference between marketing and business development, because they're equally important, and you have to allocate time to both of them really to be a successful firm. And they're also very complementary to each other and shouldn't be looked at independent of each other either. So marketing activities are more, I'd like to think of them as like a megaphone and a magnet, right? Like, how are you broadcasting who you are as a firm out there? How are you communicating that? And what are you doing to pull people in to get to know your firm better? And then business development is, once those contacts do know, or leads do know who your firm is, how are you going to convert them into clients? And how are you going to move the relationship forward? Are you going to meet face to face and develop that relationship? So step one in the planning process is always to set goals. And in this case, set goals and budget parameters. So not only what do you want to accomplish, but with what resources. And a marketing and business development budget is typically between 2% and 5%, especially for a small firm. of annual revenue. Sometimes we see anywhere from 2 to 8%, depending on if there's like an extenuating factor, like a firm and like an anniversary or a big event or a rebrand. It might be a little bit more than that, but typically that's what you can kind of expect to spend on your marketing and business development efforts. So as you're planning, these are some considerations to think about. What project types or target markets do you want to pursue? Is there anything different about your current position that you want to change? What does your portfolio look like in the future? Is your brand strong? Do you need to do branding work? Is brand awareness any kind of a factor in what you need to plan for? Is recruiting talent a factor? Also, how are you going to know if you're successful? You need to be looking and tracking your efforts with metrics every few months or every quarter, depending on the metric, because at the end of the year, if you needed to change tack in the first or second quarter, you should have known to do that. So you really do need to follow some key performance indicators and metrics. And then lastly, make sure that your business development program is factored into these goals. So everything you're talking about with marketing activities and tactics, make sure that it factors in business development. So you've got your goals, so you've set your goals. Who is on the other side of these goals? Who needs your services? Who are you marketing to? And it doesn't necessarily just mean services. I mean, if you're recruiting and that's a key goal for the next year, you're looking at you're looking at architectural talent, or you're looking at developers or custom residential clients. So you might have several different target markets that you need to address and get specific about who they are. Some people talk about personas and really trying to drill into who these people are as individuals. I'm not sure we need to be that specific, but you do need to put yourself in their shoes. And we'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide. But keep in mind also that their needs are very different. So the needs of a single family residential client is significantly different from an institutional client, as is significantly different from somebody who designs Petco or who hires designers for Petco. Very, very, very different. So really thinking in this planning process about your client's needs. What are they concerned about? How can you improve their lives through your services and your relationship with them? What drives their decisions? Again, you think about manager of a Petco design process. They just want it to look like every other Petco, right? And within budget and time frame. Much different from retired couples dream home design. Totally different considerations from the client's point of view. Really important to understand that exactly success and failure, and where do they get their information, and what organizations and social networks are they part of. And in your planning process, really looking at this and having a lot of these different kind of buckets and making these lists. And this might be familiar to several of you who attended the marketing presentation before, but it is a really integral part of the planning process. So you're thinking about, especially specific to time, like I'm thinking about 2021, what are my target clients' concerns for this year? What are their aspirations for this year? And how is your skill set uniquely going to help them? And that's, very specific to this kind of annual planning process. So now you're understanding your clients better. Think about what tactics you're going to use to get in front of them, to connect with them, to reach them. Think about how they get their information. What social media channels do they follow? What media do they consume? What events do they go to, even online? And what organizations are they part of? And then you really I like bringing a lot of people together for this, maybe a whole firm exercise, because you get some very creative ideas. It's also very important to tailor your business development program to these goals as well. So aligning your marketing activities with your goals and creating these business development touch points kind of throughout. Very important that all of these things are aligned. So define your tools that you're going to use. It might be a client relationship management software. You might be tracking your sales funnel through similar software. And also, what marketing collateral are you going to need to accomplish your business development goals, right? We've all been in situations, well, in the business development side, where you approach marketing and say, well, I need this brochure for this type of project because I'm going to meet with a potential client. Well, your marketing team should be completely and totally aware that those are the types of clients you're pursuing, so they can be prepared. And likewise, it goes both ways. Your marketing team might have some really great ideas for lead magnets that would attract more of the clients that you want. So both of these aspects should be kind of talking to each other and complementary. You might need to do prospecting research as part of your business development program. And again, these touch points I talk about, which is how often do you contact what types of clients and what do you say? So your touch points might be a lot different for a multifamily developer who's breaking ground and looking for somebody to sign on architect quickly. There might be other project types like public projects with a really defined procurement process that don't give you much latitude for different touch points, but important to factor that into your planning in terms of what are you going to do every week, every month, every quarter. Set outreach goals and hold your team accountable. Very regular meetings. And then we talked a little bit about the client acquisition strategy, and I just wanted to give you a sample of an interesting component of a business plan that I saw a few years ago. This was a chart that a firm did to gauge or to track the revenue by lead type. So, this isn't client acquisition strategy per se, it's a component of one, but it really shows that this firm gave a lot of thought to where their work was coming from. And here you can kind of see where the acquisition strategy combines business development and marketing. So you see social media represented here. Often you'll see website traffic, public RFP process. These are more marketing related. Then you see things in the referral category, the current client or repeat client category, the personal connection category. Those are very much business development. So you're really thinking about the diversity of ways that projects come into the office in this kind of client acquisition strategy component. And what you don't want to do is really treat this superficially and say, okay, well, I'll just do a bunch of social media and most of my clients will be repeat anyway. So only social media and repeat clients or referrals. You're going to need a little bit more, or best practice firms do a little bit more than that to bring in work from multiple different angles. So back to the steps, and this is where the planning starts turning into an action plan. This is assigning tasks, roles, and timelines. Who's doing what by when? Prioritize the goals, assign tasks, hold your team accountable, make sure that nobody blows off marketing meetings. I know it tends to happen, but it's really important to keep this consistent. That's the only way it's going to work. So as we're talking about this and moving into what an action plan would look like, I like to do it quarterly. So after you have done this planning exercise and you have multiple tactics and ideas, it takes a little bit of time to break it down. And I like to break it down by quarter. I think you can get really too far ahead of yourself. But what do you want to do in the first quarter? What do you want to do in the first month? And who's doing what? And how long is it going to take them? And making sure that you're not over assigning or under assigning work to people. And then at the end of the month, you can make sure all of this got done and you will have made progress. I shared this last time and I'm happy to share it again. If anybody wants this template, my email is right here. This is just a tool to help organize your marketing planning and your tactics of, annually. You have your different marketing and business development activities in rows, and then your months in columns, and milestone opportunities for milestones that might be triggering events for additional marketing needs. And this is just it's an Excel spreadsheet. It's just a really good way to organize everything if you need that. But again, it's important to create an action plan or action planning tools to make sure that your actual business plan gets off the ground.
Okay, so we're going to finish up by talking about operations, which is where the rubber meets the road. And again, we're going to kind of move a little theoretical, but actually implementing these kinds of things as you deliver projects becomes really important, for effective firm growth and profitability. So one of the first things that you need to understand when you're thinking about operations is how to staff your firm. And in a big picture way, you want to think about, who are your clients? What are the kinds of projects you're doing? Are you doing projects that with a lot of repeatable elements where your clients are requiring, you to do it better, faster, and cheaper in order to work in your market? Are you, doing routine projects over and over again? In that case, you might be an efficiency firm that needs a lot of junior staff, and you don't need quite as many project architects and principals because the work is, has repeatable projects, and the way you make money is to be really good at technology, to really get your operations effective and efficient, and to staff with a number of juniors that can, learn and get better doing these more routine projects, like big firms like Mulvaney G2 or 300 people in Seattle doing Costco's all over the world. So this is the kind of firm that can really make a lot of money, honestly. Then there's the other end of the spectrum, which is the more expertise type firms. And many firms have elements of this, and it has to do, sometimes you get a project where you're really challenged, to learn new things in order to complete it. Or design stars are sometimes in this category because it's about having special knowledge and being able to, or special talents, doing something nobody else can do, knowing something nobody else knows. So you make money by charging high fees for that, ability or knowledge. Most firms are kind of in the middle there, the experience-based firms, which is honestly the hardest business model to make money and be profitable, because profitability depends solely on the right person doing the right project. So if partners are doing what project architects can do, you're losing money. If junior staff, project architects are doing what junior staff can do, again, money going out the window. So it becomes, the ability to manage becomes really critical, and the ability to manage knowledge so that you can apply knowledge learned on one project to the next. So once you have an understanding, let's go back to organizational structures. Once you have an understanding of your business model and the right staffing that it goes along with it, you can begin to look a little deeper and actually do organizational design for your company, and really understand who's doing what and how to manage projects as they go through your firm. And in projects themselves, we'll go to the next slide. We want to think again about roles and responsibilities. Who's doing what? You don't want the principal in charge to be doing what project architects could do, and you don't want them to be doing what project support can do. And in many firms, those roles are fluid. People are project architects on one project and project support on another. That's fine, but what needs to be understood is, what are the roles, what are the responsibilities, the authority, the accountability in each one of these roles. Then finally, I just want to talk a little bit about, remote work and some tips we've learned about successful remote work, because I gather most of you are probably doing that, or doing it at least with some of your staff. It's really important to have a dedicated communication network like Slack or MS Teams, to have regular video calls. Today I was talking to a firm owner who set up office hours, and his staff signs up for 10-minute meetings. And he said they get an incredible amount done, in an hour, in these kinds of very intense short meetings rather than having long meetings that involve everybody. It's kind of like the stand-up meetings that were popular for a while. Having, meetings that are work-based, knowledge sharing based, and also socially based, I think are important in the Zoom environment. So we're finding that people are getting used to it, are finding ways to make it really effective, and are really learning, what needs to happen to do that. So as a summary, we just want to emphasize again this notion that planning is a design process, and like all design processes, all parts of it are interrelated. So the financial aspects of purpose are financial goals, and the financial aspects of marketing might be around marketing budgets, and then we have the purpose aspects of finance might be around community giving. There's a whole integrated way to approach how you want to think about your firm and how to create a preferred future. So questions?
Thank you all so much for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you again in the new year. Have safe and happy holidays.